What happens when Hollywood's most enigmatic star walks into the lion's den and refuses to play by the rules? The tension in Studio 6 amperes was palpable as Johnny Depp settled into the guest chair on The View, his signature rings catching the studio lights. What started as a routine promotional interview quickly spiraled into television history, with heated exchanges that would leave audiences stunned and one host facing serious questions about her conduct. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation that had security scrambling and producers panicking, make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below with your thoughts on celebrity interviews gone wrong. The morning had begun routinely enough. Johnny Depp arrived at the ABC studios in Manhattan, there to promote his latest independent film project. His publicist had arranged the standard talk show circuit, and The View was just another stop on the promotional tour. But from the moment Depp walked onto the set, something felt different. The usual pre-interview pleasantries were notably absent, and Whoopi Goldberg's demeanor seemed unusually cold. "So Johnny," Whoopi began as the cameras rolled, her tone already carrying an edge that veteran viewers of the show would recognize as trouble brewing. "Let's talk about your recent projects. But first, I think we need to address the elephant in the room." Depp shifted slightly in his chair, his expression remaining composed despite the obvious ambush setup. "I'm sorry. What elephant would that be, Whoopi?" "Oh, come on now," Whoopi continued, leaning forward with that particular look she reserved for guests she intended to corner. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. Your reputation, your legal troubles, the way you've conducted yourself in recent years. Don't you think the public deserves some answers?" The other co-hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances. This wasn't the direction they discussed in the pre-show meeting. Sarah Haynes looked particularly uneasy, while Joy Behar seemed to be calculating whether to jump in or let Whoopi continue her unexpected interrogation. "I'm here to discuss my work," Depp replied calmly, though his voice carried a subtle warning that anyone who knew him would recognize. "I thought that was what we agreed upon when your producers reached out to my team." "Your work?" Whoopi laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Your work includes the circus you've put everyone through. The lawsuits, the drama, the way you've dragged people through the mud. That's all part of your work now, isn't it?" The studio audience was dead silent. This was supposed to be a light entertainment segment, but it was rapidly becoming something else entirely. Depp's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady. "I've always been transparent about my life, both the good and the challenging parts. If you have specific questions about my current project, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'm not sure what you're trying to accomplish here." Whoopi's eyes flashed with something that looked almost like satisfaction at having gotten under his skin even slightly. "What I'm trying to accomplish is honesty, something that seems to be in short supply in Hollywood these days. You sit there looking all mysterious and charming. But some of us remember when you had accountability." "Accountability?" Depp's voice dropped lower, and for the first time, his carefully maintained composure began to crack. That's an interesting word coming from someone who's made a career out of making assumptions and passing judgment without knowing the full story. The tension in the studio was becoming unbearable. Camera operators were getting signals from the control booth, but no one was quite sure whether to cut to commercial or keep rolling on what was becoming must-see television for all the wrong reasons. "Assumptions?" Whoopi's voice rose, and she was clearly abandoning any pretense of professional interviewing. "I think the court of public opinion has been pretty clear about your behavior. Maybe it's time you took some responsibility instead of playing the victim." That was the moment everything changed. Depp stood up slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled, but his eyes were blazing with an intensity that made everyone in the studio take notice. The carefully crafted persona of the quirky, charming movie star was gone, replaced by something much more real and infinitely more dangerous. "The victim?" he repeated quietly, his voice carrying to every corner of the now completely silent studio. "You want to talk about victims, Whoopi? Let's talk about what happens when someone with a platform like yours decides to play judge and jury without having lived through a single day of what you're so eager to condemn." Whoopi opened her mouth to respond, but something in Depp's demeanor made her pause. For the first time since the interview began, she seemed to realize that she might have pushed too far, too fast. The other co-hosts were frozen, watching what was rapidly becoming a masterclass in how a seemingly innocent interview could go completely off the rails. "I've been in this business for over 3 decades, Depp continued, his voice gaining strength. "And I've seen plenty of people who think their opinions matter more than the truth. But you know what really gets me? It's when someone who should know better, someone who's faced their own share of public scrutiny, decides to pile on because it's easier than actually doing their job." The control booth was in chaos. Producers were frantically trying to decide whether to cut to commercial, but the raw authenticity of what was happening was unlike anything they'd ever captured. This wasn't manufactured drama. This was real conflict between two powerful personalities, and it was absolutely riveting television. Whoopi finally found her voice again, but there was a defensive edge to it now that hadn't been there before. My job is to ask the questions that viewers want answered. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Your job, Depp shot back, stepping closer to the panel, is supposed to be having conversations, not conducting witch hunts. There's a difference between journalism and whatever this is supposed to be. The studio lights seemed to burn brighter as the confrontation intensified. Whoopi's face hardened at Depp's accusation, and she leaned back in her chair with a kind of defensive posture that anyone who'd watched her for years would recognize as her preparing for battle. Witch hunt, she repeated, her voice dripping with indignation. So, now asking legitimate questions about your behavior is a witch hunt? That's convenient. Real convenient way to avoid taking responsibility for your actions. Depp's hands, adorned with those signature rings, clenched briefly at his sides before he forced them to relax. You want to talk about responsibility? Let's start with yours. You have a responsibility to your viewers, to be fair, to be accurate, and to actually listen instead of just waiting for your turn to attack. Attack? Whoopi stood up now too, matching his energy, and the dynamic in the room shifted completely. This was no longer a host interviewing a guest. This was two people who clearly had fundamental disagreements about how the world worked. I'm holding you accountable. There's a difference, though I understand why you might not see it that way. Joy Behar finally tried to interject, her voice nervous but attempting to lighten the mood. Maybe we should take a step back here and... No, Whoopi cut her off sharply, never taking her eyes off Depp. This is exactly the conversation we need to have. Too many people in Hollywood think they can just charm their way through everything without ever having to answer real questions. Depp laughed, but it was a sound completely devoid of amusement. Charm my way through? You think this is about charm? You think what I've been through, what my family has been through, is something I can just smile and joke my way past? What you've been through? Whoopi's voice rose another octave, and she was clearly past the point of caring about television decorum. What about what other people have been through because of you? What about their pain? Or does that not matter because you're the star? The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair, while Sunny Hostin was staring at Whoopi with obvious concern. This had gone far beyond anything they'd prepared for, and everyone could feel it spiraling further out of control. You don't know what you're talking about, Depp said quietly, but his voice carried a warning that made even the camera operators lean forward. You're speaking about situations you weren't part of. People you don't know, and circumstances you couldn't possibly understand. But you're so sure of yourself, aren't you? I know what I've seen, Whoopi shot back. I know what's been reported, what's been documented. I know that there are patterns of behavior that can't just be explained away with pretty words and expensive lawyers. Patterns of behavior? Depp repeated slowly as if tasting the words. That's interesting. Should we talk about patterns of behavior, Whoopi? Should we discuss how you've made a career out of making snap judgments about people you've never met? How you've used this platform to tear people down based on headlines and gossip? Whoopi's eyes flashed dangerously. Don't you dare try to turn this around on me. I'm not the one with the reputation for chaos and controversy. No, Depp agreed, his voice taking on a razor-sharp edge. You're just the one who profits from talking about it. Tell me, how does it feel to make your living passing judgment on other people's pain? Does it make you feel important? Powerful? The studio was so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning seemed deafening. Even the producers in the control booth had stopped their frantic discussions and were simply watching, mesmerized by the raw confrontation unfolding in front of them. You want to know what makes me feel powerful? Whoopi leaned forward, her voice dropping to match his intensity. Standing up to bullies. Calling out people who think their fame gives them a free pass to hurt others. Using my platform to speak truth to power. Even when that power comes in a fancy suit with pretty rings. Truth to power? Depp's laugh was sharp and bitter. You wouldn't recognize truth if it walked up and introduced itself. You deal in assumptions, gossip, and whatever narrative gets you the most attention. That's not truth, that's entertainment. At least I'm honest about what I do, Whoopi countered. I don't hide behind characters and costumes and pretend to be someone I'm not. This is me right here, having real conversations about real issues. Real conversations? Depp stepped closer to the panel, and there was something in his movement that made security personnel shift nervously at the edges of the studio. This isn't a conversation, this is an ambush. You brought me here under false pretenses, so you could grandstand and show off for your audience. False pretenses? Whoopi was on her feet again, and the confrontation was becoming increasingly physical in its intensity. Even though neither had made any threatening moves, the only false thing here is the image you're trying to project. The misunderstood artist, the victim of circumstances. It's all performance. Performance, Depp repeated, and for a moment his expression shifted to something almost sad. You think everything is performance because that's all you understand? You can't conceive of genuine emotion, genuine struggle, genuine humanity, because you've spent so long playing a character yourself. That hit something deep, and Whoopi's face changed completely. The righteous indignation was still there, but now it was mixed with something more personal, more wounded. Don't you psychoanalyze me, she said, her voice trembling slightly with rage. You don't know anything about my life, my struggles, or what I've overcome to get here. And you don't know anything about mine, Depp replied, his voice softer now but somehow more devastating. But that hasn't stopped you from making pronouncements about it. Has it? The difference is, I'm not sitting here attacking your character based on tabloid headlines. The other co-hosts were looking desperately toward the control booth, hoping for some signal about how to handle what was rapidly becoming the most uncomfortable television they'd ever been part of. The audience was completely silent, afraid that even breathing too loudly might somehow make things worse. Tabloid headlines? Whoopi's voice cracked slightly. Legal documents aren't tabloid headlines. Court transcripts aren't gossip. There are facts here that you can't just dismiss. Facts. Depp nodded slowly. Yes, let's talk about facts. The fact is that you've already made up your mind about me before I even walked through that door. The fact is that nothing I could say here today would change your opinion, because you're not interested in understanding, you're interested in being right. Whoopi's composure finally began to crack completely at Depp's assessment, and what emerged was something raw and defensive that her viewers rarely saw. Not interested in understanding? I've been trying to understand celebrities like you my entire career. The ones who think the rules don't apply to them. Who think their talent gives them license to destroy everything around them. Destroy everything around them, Depp repeated quietly, his voice taking on a dangerous calm that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. That's quite a broad brush you're painting with. Tell me, Whoopi, when you wake up in the morning and decide which celebrity you're going to eviscerate on television that day, do you ever wonder about the human cost of your entertainment? The question caught her off guard, and for a split second, genuine uncertainty flickered across her face before the defensive anger reasserted itself. Human cost? What about the human cost of your behavior? What about the people who've been hurt by your actions? My actions, Depp nodded slowly, versus your assumptions. My documented struggles with addiction and personal demons versus your public character assassination based on partial information and your own prejudices. Which one of us is actually causing harm in this moment? Joy Behar made another attempt to intervene, her voice shaking slightly. Maybe we should really take a commercial break and... No commercial break. Whoopi snapped, her attention still laser, focused on Depp. This is exactly the kind of conversation that needs to happen. Too many people get to just walk away when things get uncomfortable. Walk away? Depp's eyebrows raised, and there was something almost amused in his expression now, though not in a pleasant way. Is that what you think I do? Walk away when things get uncomfortable? You really don't know anything about my life, do you? I know enough, Whoopi shot back, but her voice had lost some of its earlier conviction. I know that you've left a trail of chaos and hurt feelings wherever you go. A trail of chaos, Depp mused, as if considering the phrase. That's poetic. But let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer. In all your years of doing this show, of tearing people apart on national television, of making snap judgments about complex human situations, have you ever once stopped to consider that you might be wrong? The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Whoopi's face went through a series of expressions, confusion, anger, and something that might have been self-doubt before settling back into defiance. I'm not wrong about you, she said, but her voice was quieter now, less certain. The evidence speaks for itself. Evidence. Depp laughed. And this time there was genuine amusement in it. Though it was dark and sharp. You mean the carefully edited sound bites? The out-of-context quotes? The sensationalized reporting designed to sell newspapers and generate clicks? That evidence? Court documents don't lie, Whoopi insisted. But she was clearly struggling now, her usual confidence shaken by Depp's relentless dismantling of her position. Court documents tell one side of complex stories, Depp corrected, his voice becoming more animated as he sensed her uncertainty. But you've never been interested in complexity, have you? It's easier to deal in black and white, good guys and bad guys, heroes and villains, makes for better television. Sarah Haynes finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Johnny, maybe we could talk about your upcoming projects instead." Depp turned to her with something approaching gentleness. "Sarah, I appreciate the attempt to redirect, but I think it's important that we finish this conversation. Your colleague here has made some very serious accusations, and I think the audience deserves to see how she handles it when someone pushes back." Whoopi's face flushed with anger at being dismissed. "Don't patronize her, and don't think you can manipulate this situation by playing the reasonable one. We all see what you're doing." "What am I doing?" Depp asked, turning back to her with renewed intensity. "Am I defending myself against unfounded attacks? Am I pointing out the hypocrisy of someone who makes their living judging others while refusing to examine their own behavior? Is that manipulation, or is that just honesty?" "Honesty?" Whoopi's voice cracked with incredulity. "You want to talk about honesty? Let's be honest about what you are, Johnny Depp. You're a middle-aged man who can't handle the consequences of his own actions, so you blame everyone else. The media, your ex-partners, society, anyone but yourself." The words hit their mark, and for the first time, Depp's carefully maintained composure completely shattered. His face darkened with a fury that made everyone in the studio instinctively step back. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You sit up there in your ivory tower, passing judgment on people's lives like you're some kind of moral authority, but you're just another bully with a microphone." "Bully?" Whoopi was shouting now, all pretense of professionalism abandoned. "I'm holding you accountable for your behavior. If you can't handle that, then get off the stage." "Get off the stage?" Depp's voice rose to match hers, and the confrontation reached its breaking point. "You want me off the stage? Fine. But let me leave you with something to think about while you're congratulating yourself on your moral superiority." He took a step closer to the panel, close enough that Whoopi actually leaned back in her chair, and when he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the studio with crystalline clarity. "You've spent your entire career tearing people down and calling it justice. You've used your platform to destroy reputations and ruin lives, and you sleep well at night because you've convinced yourself that you're the good guy in the story. But here's the truth that you'll never admit, not even to yourself. You're not a crusader for justice. You're just another predator who found a socially acceptable way to feed on other people's pain." The silence that followed was deafening. Whoopi's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. The other co-hosts looked like they wanted to disappear entirely, and even the camera operators seemed frozen in place. Depp straightened his jacket with deliberate calm, the fury draining from his face to be replaced by something cold and final. "Thank you for reminding me why I stopped doing talk shows years ago. This has been illuminating." He turned toward the exit, and Whoopi finally found her voice again, though it came out as more of a croak than her usual commanding tone. "You can't just walk away from this conversation." Depp paused at the edge of the stage area and looked back at her with something that might have been pity. "Watch me." As he walked toward the studio exit, Whoopi made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. "Security! Security! Don't let him leave! We're not finished here!" But the security personnel seemed as stunned as everyone else, and by the time anyone thought to respond, Depp was already through the studio doors. The sound of them closing behind him seemed to echo through the studio like a gunshot. Whoopi sank back into her chair, her face cycling through emotions, rage, embarrassment, and something that looked suspiciously like the dawning realization that she might have made a serious mistake. The other co-hosts sat in stunned silence, none of them quite sure how to proceed. Finally, Joy Behar's voice cut through the silence, shaky but attempting normalcy. "Well, that was unexpected." Whoopi turned to glare at her, and for a moment it looked like she might explode again, but instead she just slumped in her chair, the fight finally going out of her. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the aftermath, as producers scrambled to figure out what to do with the most explosive television they'd ever recorded. And somewhere in Manhattan, Johnny Depp was walking down a hallway, leaving behind a studio full of people trying to process what had just happened. So what do you think happened in that heated exchange? Was Whoopi justified in her line of questioning, or did she cross a line that should never be crossed? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stories that the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear.